HOA Karen burned black man's house to the ground, then walked into his courtroom the next week. It began as something small, the kind of neighborhood issue that usually ends with a polite conversation over a fence. Porch lights, mailboxes, HOA rules. Ordinary suburban details that are supposed to make neighborhoods peaceful, uniform, and safe. But for one quiet street in Wilmington, those small details became the first spark of a firestorm. By the time it was over, a man's home was reduced to smoldering ash, and the woman who had lit the match found herself standing in court, shackled at the wrists, face to face with the very man she tried to destroy. The bailiff's voice echoed sharply through the packed courtroom. "All rise." The heavy oak doors creaked open. A silence fell across the room. Not the usual respectful quiet, but the tense, waiting silence of a moment people know they'll remember. Colleen Markham stepped inside, wrists bound in cold metal cuffs. The orange of her county jumpsuit was a far cry from the crisp white blouse and pearl earrings she once wore as president of the HOA. She scanned the room nervously, her gaze flicking from reporters to neighbors, people she once scolded for the color of their mailboxes. And then, she saw him. Seated high on the bench in his black robe, composed but unyielding, was Judge Andre Colston, the man whose home she had burned to the ground, the man she had tormented for months, the man she thought she could intimidate. Colleen froze mid-step. For a fraction of a second, her confidence cracked. A whisper rolled through the courtroom like wind through dry leaves. The image was surreal. The victim of a violent crime presiding over the first hearing of the woman accused of committing it. The deputy guided her to her seat as her knees trembled. She sat down slowly, the metal of her shackles clinking softly in the tense air. Andre's eyes locked with hers, calm, steady, unreadable. But behind them lay something deeper, the silent ache of a man who had lost not just a house, but years of memories, comfort, and the sense of safety that home is supposed to bring. "Be seated," Andre finally said. His voice carried no rage, no weakness, just controlled strength. The gallery obeyed. Reporters' pens scratched furiously across their notepads. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts from the back row. A handful of neighbors, some who once gossiped with Colleen on sidewalks, now watched her with a mix of shock and disgust. Colleen's attorney leaned close to her and whispered urgently, "Don't look at him. Eyes on me." But it was too late. Everyone had seen it, that electric moment between the arsonist and her victim. Just a week earlier, this neighborhood had been arguing over petty issues, porch lights and hedge trimming. Now, the same street was at the center of a criminal case that had made local headlines. But this story didn't begin in a courtroom. It began months earlier with something as small as a single light bulb. To some, Colleen Markham was the guardian of the neighborhood, always walking around with a clipboard, quoting bylaws, reminding people of rules. She was the president of the Homeowners Association, and she carried that title like a crown. To others, she wasn't a guardian at all. She was a tyrant. Her first run-in with Andre Colston happened over something almost laughably small. His porch light. One spring evening, Andre stood watering his plants as the sun set. That's when Colleen marched up his driveway, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. "Judge Colston," she said without greeting, "your porch light stays on too late." Andre turned off the hose, a little surprised by the tone. "Good evening to you too, Ms. Markham. The light's for security. It shuts off around midnight." "The bylaws say 11, she snapped back. "You're disrupting the neighborhood." Andre gave a polite nod. "Noted. I'll look into it." But she didn't let it go. First came a written complaint taped to his mailbox. Then another one about the color of the mailbox itself. Then a letter about the angle of his parked car. Then the length of his hedge. Each note was more petty than the last. First, Andre brushed it off. But soon, neighbors began to whisper. "She doesn't bother anyone else like that," said Linda Garvey from 2 doors down. They were right. This wasn't about neighborhood rules anymore. This was personal. As weeks turned into months, Colleen's obsession grew darker. She hovered near his house at night, pacing like a watchful hawk. She snapped photos of random corners of his property, pretending to document violations. She even stood across the street, watching, waiting, daring him to react. Andre tried to keep his composure. His home was supposed to be a safe place, the last piece of peace he held onto after losing his wife. Every flower bed carried a memory. Every wall carried history. But Colleen's constant harassment turned that sanctuary into a prison. One night, when he confronted her outside, she leaned in and hissed, "You don't belong here. Not the way you think you do." Her words pierced deeper than she could ever know. By midsummer, her obsession crossed into open hostility. Neighbors began to hear her muttering during her nightly walks. She threw rocks at his door. She followed him with her phone, filming his yard as if she were building a case no one else could see. "She's testing how far she can go," Sharon, Andre's sister, warned him during one visit. Andre documented everything. Every letter, every threat, every late-night incident. He believed the law would protect him, but he underestimated how far a grudge can burn. It happened on a suffocatingly hot Thursday night in late July. Andre jolted awake to the sharp smell of smoke clawing at his lungs. The fire alarm screamed. Through the window, the night sky glowed orange. Flames were already crawling up the side of his house. In seconds, the world he built was on fire. Barefoot and choking on smoke, Andre grabbed his briefcase, the only thing he could reach, and stumbled outside. Neighbors were shouting his name. Someone called 911. Sirens wailed in the distance. Within minutes, his home, the place he loved, the one safe space left to him, was devoured by flames. "This wasn't an accident," he whispered hoarsely as firefighters fought the inferno. He was right. Investigators found accelerant along the fence line. A neighbor's camera caught Colleen's SUV circling the block just before the fire started. Detectives searched her garage and found the gas can that matched the chemical residue. Colleen Markham was arrested 3 days later. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She walked into the station with her head held high, as if she was the victim, as if she hadn't just burned someone's world to the ground. A week later, the world turned upside down again when Colleen entered the courtroom and saw the man she tried to destroy sitting as the judge. The room buzzed with reporters. Neighbors sat shoulder to shoulder, whispering as deputies led Colleen in, hands chained. She lifted her chin, that same defiant tilt she wore at every HOA meeting. But this time it meant nothing. Her attorney rose. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty." The gallery gasped. Even with the surveillance footage, the gas can, the testimony, she denied everything. Andre didn't flinch, but inside his heart twisted. For a brief second, Colleen smirked. Not because she thought she'd win, but because forcing him into this position was its own victory to her twisted mind. Behind closed doors, Sharon pleaded with him. "Andre, you can't sit on this case. This is too personal." But he shook his head. If justice only matters when it's easy, then it's not justice at all. When the hearing resumed, the weight in the room was palpable. The woman who once strutted through the neighborhood giving orders now sat small and shaking. At the defendant's table, her hands trembled, her breath hitched. The confidence she once had evaporated in the shadow of the courthouse walls. But this moment wasn't about revenge. Not for Andre. It was about something bigger, showing that even when someone takes everything from you, the law still stands taller than hate. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. It was the collision of obsession, hatred, and justice. And as the trial began to unfold, one truth echoed through the courtroom. Colleen Markham had tried to erase a man's home. But now she was the one standing in the fire,